We are back, Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50, interviewing great folks from around Indianapolis, Christians who are doing good. Our whole show is based on Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. Do good, do good, do good. We're really happy every week to have lots of different folks from around Indy who are believers, who are participating in a beneficial way in their neighborhoods. The Comenius Institute is what sponsors our show. At the Comenius Institute, we cross 3 bridges. The first bridge is over at IUPUI, helping young Christian college students think Christianly about their disciplines, thinking about all things from a Christian-centered point of view. And then we actually have a community that we're invested in as well. And the community that we invest ourselves in is this radio show. And we've been doing this for 4 years now, have over 175 episodes, have had over 200 guests. And one of the big things that we're doing is actually bridging cultures. So one of the issues that we're always confronting is whether or not we can actually have conversations with each other about lots of different things and sometimes difficult topics. But the idea, of course, is always about community. The third bridge we cross is into culture. And one of the ways that we do that is in our 2-minute videos that we produce every week called Truth and Two. You can go to our website, comeniusinstitute.org.com, and find any of those. We've got over 50 of them up now, coming out on Tuesdays. And then we also have our website, warpandwoof.org. That's warpandwoof.org. Those 2 websites support our work and give people a digital connection, a digital landing point for the kinds of things that we do. You might also be interested in iTunes. So if you go to the iTunes store, you can actually look up our Warp and Woof radio show. Glad to be invested in that way as well. And of course on Facebook, not only are we doing Facebook Live right now, but we are also going to be archiving the video that we are connected with. We'll link podcasts later on as well, so be watching on my Facebook page for all of those kinds of connections. But today, we have a great honor, a great privilege really to introduce you to a pretty new ministry throughout Indianapolis, and we want to avail ourselves of the time with Sally John here today to talk about the kinds of ministry and the kind of the work that she's doing in and through Tabernacle Presbyterian down in the city. Sally, thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share about Fresh Stop.
Well, good. And you have this really cool banner behind you now.
Yes,
you know, that's
brand
really
new
nice.
banner, first time we've ever gotten to use it. So
look at that. And it's on our show, first today. That's really great. And is this your first radio interview for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And has Channel 4, 6, or 13 said, hey, we need to have Sally on?
No,
Oh, seriously? You got to be on TV with all this good stuff going on. Well, we'll see what we can do about pulling strings that way for you. But right now you're on TV, Facebook Live. We're really glad for the opportunity to ask you some questions about the kinds of good things that you're doing. So why don't you give us what we always ask all of our guests, just a little bit of a biographical sketch about yourself and your family.
Okay. I'm married and have been married for 41 years.
Congratulations.
Married my high school sweetheart. We have 2 amazing young men. They are 38 and 36 now. The 38-year-old is married and has a couple of darling grandchildren, 6 and 4. They live in Chicago. He's a computer web designer. She does amazing things. We didn't even talk about her, but she's a human rights attorney.
Oh, wow.
And works in the area of human rights abuses of
Wow.
corporations in other countries.
Okay.
And then we have another son who is a musician, majored in piano performance and composition all the way to the doctoral level. He lives in Minneapolis with his girlfriend who's a cellist, and he writes music and composes.
Wonderful.
And I'm a piano teacher as well.
Yeah, so a musician for a long
got that
time.
from me. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And did you also taught, right? Taught music as well?
I taught school music, directed choirs at the middle school level, which was quite a challenge in Washington Township for about 13 years. And
I've
now I
always-
teach piano at home.
I've always believed that there's a special place in heaven for junior high teachers. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame going into junior high
Oh.
classrooms.
Yes.
That's where I cut my teeth.
It's
I
all-consuming.
remember those days.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go to sleep at night because you don't know what to do with those kids. You never know how the hormones are going to cause somebody to react to you.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
All kinds of things there.
Yeah, but I did love it when I had the energy.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing else like teaching. It's a whole different ballgame than anything else in life.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your church and how this connection, your ministry, connects to your church.
Okay. I go to Tabernacle Presbyterian Church at 34th and Central. I've been there my entire life. My parents were married there. I was, born there. I was married there. And we have a long history of caring about the people who live in our location. Sure. There was a time in the 1960s when we considered moving to the suburbs because that's where the people who went to church were starting to live. Right. So many neighborhoods were built in the 60s and congregants were moving out there, but we made this decision to stay.
And tell everybody where the church is located.
It's at 34th and Central, and it's I'm sure anybody who's been down there has noticed it. It's huge. We have beautiful stained glass windows. We've got a state-of-the-art football field and an amazing recreation program. A lot of people have grown up playing ball at Tab. And, so we have a long history of, trying to help the people in the neighborhood and just being where we are and seeing that as God's calling for us. That's a marvelous thing to consider, that this is really generated from the people within the church body itself. It's not staff driven, as it were, and you see other kinds of congregations doing those things. But tell us a little bit about the ministry aspect of this. This is a very new endeavor from your vantage point. How has that been in its development at TAB? Tell us a little bit about the response and the reaction to this from the congregants in your congregation. Well, from the things that we're already doing at TAB, we do tutoring. We began the Raphael Health Center, which is located across from us. We were involved in the origin of the Oaks Academy and the Neighborhood Legal Clinic. We have always cared about the whole person. We are not just telling people the good news about Jesus Christ, which, we care about too, but we care about the whole person. And we live in a neighborhood that has low access to good food, especially with the closing of the Double Eights a few years ago. We had a Double Eight right, a block from our church. And people who live in our neighborhood do not have ready access to a good grocery store where they can get healthy food. It's mostly having to go to the the Quickie Mart or whatever, something like that. And I know from my research that I've done that cheap calories are not the calories that are good for you, mostly because our government subsidizes corn and soy. And so you can go get corn and soy products and fill up, but then it makes you sick. Right. Processed food we're talking about. Yes, processed food. And then we've got an epidemic of childhood diabetes and heart disease and, all kinds of problems with people who can't afford to eat the way I eat. Right. And that's part of, my drive and passion for this ministry is I think it's important to eat organic. I only eat grass-fed beef. And then I look at someone else who's suffering, they're obese, and, why can't they eat the way I eat? I want to help them be able to have a healthy body. And when we have a healthy body, then as the temple of the Holy Spirit, we are ready to serve God much more easily. Makes a huge difference. Yeah. Your comments earlier about the gospel, just huge, important statement here to make. Let me just take a moment to make that the gospel in word without deed is empty. The gospel has to be demonstrated by works. So when you read passages like Ephesians 2:8 and 9, which is the classic passage about you're saved by grace through faith, verse 10 often gets left out, which is that you are created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which you have been created to do. So the fact that you do something with what you believe is essential. And we won't even get into the book of James, but that's what the book of James is all about, is actually doing that.
Of course, the flip side is also problematic. If you only have the deeds without the gospel, then it's really empty as well. That's a whole different kind of discussion. But what we're talking about here and the connections that you've made in this neighborhood in all of these different venues. I'm thinking now about Oaks. I'm thinking about, did you say law
Raphael
offices?
Health, yes, legal clinic.
Legal clinic. You've got, the medical emphasis there as well. And now you're into the food benefits for people as well. All of these things are marvelous and good, and the whole person is really important when it comes to Christian understanding of shalom. Shalom literally means to be whole or complete. And so when we talk about shalom, we're not just talking about peace or hello, means those things too, but we're really interested in the whole person, as you both suggested. So that little bit of theological background, helping everybody to connect with what's actually going on at Tabernacle Presbyterian is really important ideas as well. So you have this really ministry-driven congregation, which is really invested in the community, which is really cool to talk about. And just by the way, just a shout out to everybody at Tabernacle Presbyterian, especially those of you who are playing in the jazz concerts in the summertime. Thank you for that. These things are, marvelous and good, speaking about the whole person again.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to your concern about diet and the kinds of food you said that you eat. You saw that there was a real problem for other folks who didn't have the same access. So obviously that was some kind of impetus or beginning for you in all of this. Apart from that, though, what actually got it started? What got your organization going?
Getting emotional, but anyway, so cool to have your kids grow up and become adults and start influencing you.
There you go.
And my oldest son worked for a nonprofit called the Quixote Center, and he had heard about these kinds of things going on, fresh stops in Louisville, Kentucky, and he got excited about it. He has dietary issues and has to be very careful about his diet, and I think that probably was helping to drive him too. So he started a couple of fresh stops in Washington, D.C. I was watching him and just thinking, wow, that would be so cool if we could do something like that here. And I thought about Tab's location. And I just really felt there was just a moment in time when I had stopped at a farmer's market. I'm walking out to my car with my beautiful produce that I just bought, looking forward to eating it, and just kind of praying and thinking about, wow, it would be so cool to do this, to do what Jeremy's doing. But I thought I could never do that. Jeremy was doing it all, and he was paid. I could never do that. I'm an introvert. I can't imagine finding the farmers. I'm not a salesperson.
Right.
How would I do this? And as I started praying about it, step by step, it just fell together. And I could talk more about that.
No, that's good.
How it came together.
Well, let's pause and just mention the issue of inspiration. Oftentimes, this is the way these things go. Somebody else, some other place is doing this kind of work, and we think to ourselves, wow, this would be really cool if we did this. And so we're inspired or kind of compelled by the Spirit in different ways, and sometimes by other people's spirits. So it's really kind of cool that you have children that inspired you. And, shout out to all the kids out there. Thank you for your inspiration for your mom. We're grateful.
Kids,
yeah, that's it. That's important. Yeah.
We still call them kids.
That's fine.
Yeah.
They still are, aren't they? They always will be. Yeah, so when we talk about the inspiration for this and getting this thing off the ground, let's take that next step. Once you were inspired, as you suggested, to do something like this that you saw elsewhere, what was it that kind of came together that made this a possibility? Maybe some of the steps that were involved, if there's somebody else out there that's listening or watching and going, wow, this would be really cool to do this in our community. What were some of the ways that you got this thing in motion?
Well, I was telling Mark earlier that our congregation is really almost lay run. There, just so much of what happens comes from the congregation. It's not top down. And I had been tasked by our associate pastor with trying to see if we could do more small groups. And I was working with someone else, and we were meeting, and what ended up happening is he and I each started a small group as we were talking about what we wanted to do, and his small group went on a mission trip, and then my small group became Fresh Stop. So we were going into Lent, and we gave other people opportunities to start some small groups that would just meet during Lent. And I had educational materials from my son who had taught a class at church, and I thought, I'll just start a class and see if there's any interest. And he said, I needed 10 volunteers, and we just kept meeting. We read books together, we studied scripture, we watched YouTube videos, we learned a lot.
Nice.
And in the end, we had all our bases covered. You know, we had all these 10 kind of jobs that had to be done for the Fresh Stop to happen. And so we went forward and kind of did a pilot. We talked to our session about it, and they were behind us, and that was our first season. We were off and running, and that was 2013. So we're actually starting our 7th season now. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, by the way, Sally just used the word session, and and for Presbyterians that just simply means kind of like a leadership council or a leadership team or the group of elders, for instance, something to this effect, depending on which kind of Presbyterian you are and which church you're invested with.
It's the ruling body.
It's the ruling body.
So, like, unlike other churches, it's not the pastors who rule the church.
And that's really important for everybody to understand. Yeah. And going back to your driven by the congregants is really cool. I just think it's really important to say to everybody out loud that what you just heard Sally explain is really important to remember when you're starting a nonprofit. And let's just use the one word. It's called preparation. So you can't just jump into stuff and say, oh, I see a need. Why is it so important to be prepared? If somebody said to you, well, I can just go to the farmer and I can do all of these, what would you say the importance of preparation might be?
Well, okay, a person could go to farmers, but part of the preparation too was, as we get into what Fresh Stop is, you have to have people who will buy your produce.
Yes.
And the Fresh Stops in Louisville began as grassroots level type of a grassroots level program. So it was begun by the people who are buying the lower shares, the lower priced shares. Ours was begun by the people who were buying the higher priced shares. So we had, in the beginning, once we got going, we needed to reach out and find the people who could benefit, because that's what we're all about. Right. We're not just a buying program for people who could go to Earth Fair and buy organic produce if they wanted.
And Earth Fair is what? I don't even know what Earth Fair is.
It's a store in Carmel that has a mission. They only carry organic produce.
Oh. Well, there you go. I just learned something new, everybody. I now know what Earth Fair is.
Yeah.
These are important distinctions to make, and ones I think that everybody will benefit from, because they're going to listen to this program and say, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this. And one of the things is you need to know who you're going to be serving in your community. Yeah. That would be kind of like important, it would seem. And getting everybody on the same page. You were talking about reading books together and watching YouTube and actually having a small group team. You said that you needed 10 volunteers. So what are some of the things that these volunteers are invested with every week or every month when you do this?
I'll go kind of chronologically.
Go ahead.
So it starts, I guess I'm the first volunteer that does anything. We have Fresh Stops twice a month, and we're just beginning our very first one this Saturday. They occur on Saturday mornings between 10 and 11. So my son created our platform, our website, where you can order and you can pay and you can figure out how much you're supposed to pay. And so once people have paid, I get a spreadsheet of who has paid and how much they've paid. But we're also collecting money from people who just drop by the church and give them a check or hand me cash, or if they're paying with their SNAP card, I have to get with them because I have to run it through my phone. You cannot use a SNAP card online. So once I've got all the shares, and I know we've got 50 people who want produce this time, and we have $700. So then I text that to Chad on Monday morning, because it's Sunday night, midnight is when you have to have ordered by. That's the deadline.
Okay.
Chad Lynn is our farmer liaison. He knows our farmers. We work only now at this point with farmers who go to the Broad Ripple Farmers Market. So he starts talking to them. What do you have? We have, what did I say, 60, 50, 60 shares, and and starts doing the math and figuring out what he can get. He knows what's a good price. They try to give us a good price because we buy in bulk and they care about our mission.
Sure.
And so he gets all that ordered, and then I get an email, and a few other people get an email. The church secretary has to write, or the bookkeeper has to write checks to the farmers based on the amount. And then I usually let the people who have bought shares know what's going to be in that share, so that when they come Saturday morning, they're prepared. Everybody gets the exact same thing.
Okay.
And so then, let's see, chronologically keeping on going. So then he creates a newsletter that we hand out, and the newsletter lists out what the produce was, sometimes tells about our farmers. We always have several recipes, especially for things like beets or kohlrabi, things that people might be a little worried about, like, I don't know what to do with a turnip, And we have people who come and they'll say, oh, I'm not going to take the turnips. I don't like the turnips. And we always say, please just take them. Give it a try. So he's creating the newsletter. I also let our chef know. We've got a chef who comes and does a demonstration. Yeah.
That's cool.
So, and right now we're using the guy who's awesome. His name is James Bryant, and he works for our church and does all of our cooking for the church and does other things, and we pay him extra to do the Saturday morning thing. So he's prepared because he gets a share, and he's going to show us what to do with it. And then then Larissa and her gang come on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. They use the church van. They go to Broad Ripple Farmers Market. They pick everything up. She's got a husband and a friend who help her, sometimes her kids. And then they show up at Tab with the van at 9 o'clock. Then we have to cart all the vegetables in, and we lay them out on the tables. And so that's more helpers and volunteers. And then we have signs. I have somebody who creates the signs each week. It's take a pound of tomatoes, take one bunch of carrots, take 2 zucchini. So we've got the signs, and then when people come with their own bags at 10 o'clock, between 10 and 11, we've got somebody, Yolanda, who checks them out, checks them off. Everybody has paid ahead of time, and then they go through, and sometimes there's somebody who will help them if they've never come before. And they get all their vegetables, and they hang out. We've got coffee. We eat the samples that James is making. We hang out in the kitchen. Tab has a really, just several years old kind of teaching kitchen. And it's just fun to talk and understand what to do with the vegetables. Let's see what else happens. Then we have to clean up. And we also, 10:45, we usually call the people who haven't shown up just to give them an opportunity if they forgot, even though I've sent them a reminder email. And then we start cleaning up, and we usually have stuff left over, which James takes. And we have a soup kitchen at Tab, and he incorporates those things into what he's feeding people during the week.
Wow. This is just fantastic stuff. We need to take a break, one song break, but when we come back, we're going to continue this discussion about this really cool ministry going on at Tabernacle Presbyterian with Sally John. We're really grateful for her good work and all of the folks that are helping in this particular ministry. And just notice, by the way, everybody, especially if you're Facebook Live, we have a great banner behind Sally. That's exactly what this is all about. Make sure that you take a good look at this and the opportunities that might be even available in your own neighborhood to do these kinds of things. I'm especially looking forward, by the way, when we come back after break, to talk a little bit more about the chef, because this is just really a cool thing that you have a teaching kitchen. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to take a one-song break. We'll be right back. Facebook Live, we're still here. Thanks ever so much. I let everybody know, especially our guests, that we're still on live, so that nobody does, So this is really fascinating. I mean, this is really cool stuff, and people are getting good word here today.
Man, I am over so giddy.
Yeah, you're getting excited over there, aren't you?
Because he'll tell you, I do initiatives like this about promoting food deserts in the city. I work with Mount Carmel Church, but more importantly, Tabernacle is where I played my first Little League football game.
I thought I saw it.
Packers, Tom Kleinsmith and all those guys. I mean, just all those things, those memories when I was 7 years old. You were talking about Tab, but they've been doing this forever.
Yeah.
They've been doing this in that community forever. So I work with JT and a lot of the youth program. James Turner, over at Tab.
Uh-huh.
He does a lot of the youth programs over there, football, basketball, coaching. We brought him up coaching him, and now he's doing the same thing that me and my guys were doing because Jerry Dingle and I used to coach at Tab for probably 8 to 10 years back in the, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just like listening and saying, man, Tab has been doing this for years, you know, making sure that community stays tight.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal. So thank you.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. We keep improving. Have you seen the new football
Oh,
field? Maybe
absolutely.
that's 5 years old by now.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Terry Glenn had a lot to do with, you know, getting that field over there. And used to play with the Colts. And I remember that whole development issue. And I just said, man, Tab is, I mean, really, because that neighborhood easily, like you were mentioning earlier, easily walk away from, you know, the responsibility of their stakeholders, man, because that area needs double eights, all those double eights closed down. And you're talking about people taking 6 miles, man, to the next closest grocery store.
Yeah, and you don't always have a car to get there.
And most of those residents are low income seniors who don't have vehicles, all that stuff. And we start talking about that dynamic trickling down.
It matters.
Childhood obesity and all that is, I mean, it's all related. Like you say, we've got Marathon gas stations now serving as the grocery stores for families, and that's, you know,
that's not a good thing.
No, because you can't earn if you're not sharp when you're going to school.
If you're not eating the right stuff, that's a whole disappointment too.
Yeah,
Cheetos and Mountain Dew for breakfast.
Exactly.
Don't make for a good day at school.
And like I said, you look at Cheetos and Mountain Dew, mostly corn.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's why they're cheap calories. You can
diabetes, high cholesterol, all tied into that one ball. So Mount Carmel, we did an initiative with them last year. We did 4 live remotes. They had from the planning to the first yield to the second yield, and then the last one they had a cook-off where people were barbecuing and putting squash on the grill. I mean, it was phenomenal. Yeah, so I participated in that last year. We had a great time just introducing people to fresh fruits and vegetables and whole foods, healthy, you know, because most people, and this guy was doing zucchini on the grill. Kids weren't used to it, man. They were like, they were like, he was like, they were getting into some zucchini after they came off the grill. Oh, man. It was phenomenal.
I have a story about beets on the grill. And I don't know if I talked to you about the meat that we bring in.
No, let's talk about beets and meat.
Yeah, let's talk about
beets and meat.
What's the name of the guy? Because
I know the guy that wrote the books. I read the books too.
And I mean, he would bring his grass-fed beef and you know, grass-fed, all the foods that he would bring. There would be no preservatives. It would all be.
Is this Michael Pollan are we talking about?
It's not, but I read a lot of books. We read books by him. Yeah, in our class.
Can you get a quick picture of the two of us here?
Yeah, I already have one out here.
Yeah.
It's good too.
Good.
I mean, kind of. I know you have to be the, Mr. Michael Douglas. So. That's good. Let me see if Sally B likes this, because you know we have to make sure the ladies are happy. So.
I know. You're right. I look a little fuzzy, don't I?
Let's take it out.
Are you?
I think I look okay, but.
No, it's up to you.
It's all good. I told you, I'm here. Please. Let's pull this back. Pull that back.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, let's see if this is better. There you go.
Yeah, that's good. That's
All right.
fine. How do you feel about how the way you look?
I never look. He teases me about being the good-looking one, you know. We call each other twin because we think.
And I always say he's the pretty one.
Yeah.
No, look at
it. Give me a break. Oh,
it's my guy.
Yeah, man. 4 years. Get to know somebody after that length of time. Oh, just by the way of saying this, we always say to people, hey, if you think of somebody else needs to be on the show, just give me a shout out. Shoot me an email.
My daughter-in-law would be so awesome. She lives in Chicago. I don't know if you
want
to
this travels. This travels. So if you and the Fresh Stop Produce, like I told you what I was doing with Mount Carmel, wanted to come and do a live remote, and talk to some of the people who are benefiting. And
He
all
will
that.
do stuff like that. So
Oh,
yeah, that would be really cool for you,
yeah.
and good publicity as well.
Mhm.
So just keep that in mind throughout the
Yeah.
summer, because it's a good rallying point.
Yeah, to come and see it is
Absolutely.
a lot different than talking
If
about it.
your kids come down from Chicago,
Mhm.
let me know.
Yeah.
They can go to Wednesday or something.
So Wednesdays.
But if something else happens, so we can get her on even remote, we might be able to do something.
Katie Westmoreland says she's got to go, but she's going to do some research about this type of ministry.
She is something else. That one. She's out in California.
Christian wisdom and college life.
And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Every Wednesday, we come to you from 11 to 11:50, interviewing great folks, believers, Christians from around Indianapolis who are doing good. Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. This week, we're blessed to have Sally John here with us from Tab Presbyterian, doing some really cool stuff. For those of you on Facebook Live, just take a look at this really cool setup here, the Fresh Stop Produce. This is just a really nice stand-up. You need to become familiar with what's going on down there, and the emphasis that Sally was giving us here in the first segment of the show was on the wholeness of the person, the importance of serving the whole of the person. So Tab Presbyterian's been invested in sports, they've been invested in the medical field, they've been invested in law, all kinds of great things going on down there in the city on 30th and Central. So thank you ever so much again for being here. And I want to just to say, give a shout out, by the way, to this whole bit about having a teaching kitchen and a chef. I want to come down and learn how to cook a turnip. I mean, seriously, we do all kinds of stuff on the grill, but I've never done turnips. Anyway, this is really cool. You said that you were really excited to tell us about beets and meats. So I just want to give this right over to you and tell us about some of those stories you want to tell us.
Okay, so probably 2 years ago, there were people going through picking up their shares, and like usually happens, somebody said to me, I don't eat beets. I'm not going to take the beets. And I said, oh, just take them. Maybe you can give them away, but take your beets, and we're going to show you what to do with them. There's a recipe or two in the newsletter. So she took the beets, and that time, I never knew that beets. Genetically modified to resist Roundup, and yet we put it in our bodies, and we're supposed to digest it, and our bodies are supposed to feel good about this thing that can resist Roundup, and that's what if you go buy regular old beef at the store, that's what they've been eating is this corn, so that's basically what they're made out of. And anyway, so I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could have beef for our people? And my son Jeremy is really good he knows how to use the whole cow. He was really into bone broth and organ meats and all of this stuff. So originally our vision was, let's get a whole cow for the Fresh Stop community and we'll all learn how to work with it. That didn't work out. But what we have done is we just kind of zeroed in on grass-fed hamburger, which tends to be 90 to 95% lean, stew meat, which the people love, and you have to cook it for a long time because grass-fed beef is tough.
Okay.
It's not created, the cows are not chained up so that they become fat and tender. They walk around and they develop muscles, and that's, part of the difference. So, but the stew meat, you just cook it for a long time in the stew. It's so delicious. So while I'm talking about grass-fed meat, I had quit eating beef. I don't know, I just kind of was saying, I just don't like the way beef tastes, and I didn't realize it had changed. I would eat chicken and fish, but I had a grass-fed hamburger, and I thought, oh, this is like what we used to eat. This is so good. This is why I used to like hamburgers, and I don't like them anymore. They taste yucky now. So anyway, so my son Jeremy actually is the one that found this facility in Colfax, Indiana called This Old Farm. And we buy the hamburger, we buy stew meat, and we also buy bones. A lot of our Fresh Stop people have gotten into the bone broth thing.
Bone broth again. You heard it here first. Go ahead.
And so then we sell them. But the problem is, even when I buy it in bulk, it's still, the hamburger and stew meat is still $6.40 a pound. If you're lower income, you're not going to pay that much.
Exactly, yeah.
So I have gotten, I've had people who wanted to invest in my ministry, and so I use that money to subsidize the beef.
Nice.
So we sell it at 2 different price levels, just like we sell the produce. If you're higher income, you pay $6, so it's still a good price. I've seen grass-fed beef for $9.99 a pound. I've seen it for $7.99 typically. So if you're higher income, you pay $6. If you're lower income, you pay $3 a pound for the hamburger or the stew meat, or $3 for 2 pounds of bones.
Bones again.
Yeah, so we have made, so we have that frozen, vacuum sealed, and we sell it from a cooler separate from the produce.
All right.
And people just pay whatever you're paying for the produce, that's your level that you pay for the meat, or the bones.
$3 a pound for hamburger is really a decent price. I mean, it's about as good as you're ever going to get. So that's really a nice price. Again, though, it's nice to hear about people subsidizing the ministry in this way, that they've come alongside you and said, here's this contribution, we want you to use it for this. And that really is so beneficial. So this is a very different approach. There are a lot of different kinds of ministries in and around Indianapolis, much less the United States, that do a pantry approach to fooding for other people. And there's nothing, by the way, when we talk about distinctiveness between the kinds of ministries people have, we're not disparaging one or elevating the other. We're just saying here are the distinctives. Tell us about the distinctives from your vantage point in terms of fresh stock produce, obviously beyond the fact that it's fresh and you do this for a few months out of the year. Give us some distinctiveness there for your particular ministry.
Okay, well, for one, we're not giving away anything. You have to pay, and another way that it's subsidized now is the $6. So if you have, you can't see it on my, you can at the very top corner there.
There you go.
Whoa.
SNAP benefits.
Yeah, SNAP benefits. If you have a SNAP card, we originally were part of the Fresh Bucks program, which was a government program where I would send them a form and tell them how many people paid with their SNAP card, and that's why they could pay $6, because then I would get reimbursed $6 more. So I was still getting $12 a share, even though people with paid with the SNAP cards were getting it for $6 a share, which is just amazing. But that government program shut down at the beginning of last season, a year ago, June. They suggested I try to get some donations to continue it, and I realized they had only given me about $350, to do this. And then last year, though, we got a lot more people paying with their SNAP card, so it ended up being more like $700. But again, I just got people to donate, and we kept that going so that people can still pay with their SNAP card. So back to your question, so people are paying. Another thing is when you take home your fresh stock produce, you're not just gonna put it on the table. It's not a can of beans. It's not, macaroni and cheese in a box. It's not pre-made food.
Right.
So you have to know what to do with it. And a lot of people, especially nowadays, feel insecure about, like, I don't know what to do with the butternut squash,
But come back to the idea that you have a chef that's actually showing people what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
And we always wanted to make sure to use the unusual things, but then people get to taste it.
Mm-hmm.
They get to see what is involved. And another thing that we do that has been helping people, that I've used some of this extra money that I've gotten for, is we have a giveaway at each Fresh Stop. So I've gotten things like spiralizers, knife sets, cutting boards, things that you need, to work with this produce.
Sure.
And we'll just have a drawing and we'll give it away.
Nice.
And I usually give away something that's about like a $50 item. And so that helps people, because in order to work with the produce, you kind of have to have a refrigerator, you have to have knives, a stove. Yeah, you have to have time and sort of the wherewithal and the confidence.
Right.
To
And
work
coming
with
back
the
to the
produce.
Confidence issue is huge.
We're trying to help people have confidence,
Right.
when they pick up their produce. But our parents knew what to do with something that came straight from the garden or straight from the farm. But us and our kids, our adult kids, we weren't raised like that as much. I gave my kids Pop-Tarts for breakfast when they were growing up, and cereal, and
We'll give you a pass on all that stuff. It's okay. We get the whole point of that. And specifically, you have been taught, we all have been taught in one way or another about the kinds of things that we eat or don't eat. And it really does take an education, which, it sure seems like that's exactly what you're doing. You're giving a community an education on food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is not just for the people who are buying the $6 and $12 shares.
Yeah.
The people who are paying $25 a share also don't know what to do, and also need to be eating a more healthy diet. We all do.
It's one of the, I'm just going to give a shout out to all the radio stations and also all the TV stations, 4, 6, 13. Y'all need to do something with this ministry here downtown and help them out. Give them a shout out. Bring your trucks down there. Do a promo for these folks, because the kinds of things that are happening in this place where you're teaching people how to actually cook, man, this is huge. The educational issue about food, we often just bypass it, don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very significant process that you're invested in. From your vantage point, where do you see the future going with Fresh Stop?
It would be awesome to have more Fresh Stops located throughout our city. The Kepper Institute, KI, I think 20-something, and Boulevard.
Okay.
They have something. It's not called a Fresh Stop, but I helped them get going, and it's very, very similar. And it would be awesome to see, strategic locations of this kind of thing. Last time I checked in Louisville, they had 10 locations.
Wow.
They were working through churches, through different kinds of organizations. Each location was giving away, or not selling, about 60 shares each per time. So when you think about what's going on there, they are really changing the way people feed themselves and the way they buy their produce.
Because people are so digitally oriented, tell us the name of your website where everybody can go to find you.
It's www.freshstop.org/tab. So FRESHSTOP.org/tab.
Okay.
TAB.
And TAB, of course, from Tabernacle Presbyterian down in the city. These kinds of things are necessary, and immediately I'm thinking about the word discipleship. So when you said, for instance, that it would be really cool in the future to see more of these kind of grow, honestly, I see this as a discipleship ministry. You're discipling other Christians, perhaps other churches, to say the whole person matters, and here's one of the ways you can invest in your community. And one of the ways that you can make the gospel attractive, Titus 2:10, is to actually do good for people so that they see this and then they realize, wow, Christians are doing this. This must be really important and good. The opportunities that you have for discipleship into the future, do you have other groups that are interested in this? I mean, do you have people stopping by saying, hey, give us some pointers, that kind of thing?
I have had people tell me, oh, I would love to do this at my whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, contact me through email. And they haven't. I had Jeremy, my son, and I had the opportunity to present this at Presbytery, which is a district-wide meeting of pastors. And we had a number of people sign, up and say, we want to find out how to do this at our church, but none of it went anywhere. It takes someone like me or Jeremy,
Yep.
I think a point person who wants to really invest time and effort and find volunteers and do all of the prep work. It's not just something you can just go do.
So this kind of brings us back full circle to how we started the show, which was about inspiration. So there has to be somebody, and I don't feel bad about somebody like you. It's absolutely true. You've been inspired to do this. The Spirit of God has invested you with this devotion and direction, and so you're taking this thing and you're going to run with it, and people need to recognize it takes work to do this.
Yeah, and our program can only grow so big.
Sure.
We usually sell about 50 to 60 shares. One time, year before last, we sold 80 shares. That was really our limit, with the van and the people and setting it up, and so we cannot grow. There's a limit to how far we can grow.
If you were we've got about 3 minutes left. If you have just 30 seconds to tell people one thing that you want them to walk away with from this show about, 30 seconds to tell them anything you want to say about Fresh Stop, what would you tell them?
I would love for more people to buy shares and come and get produce. And if you go to our website, it's very easy to sign up for shares and to start incorporating this into your life. There's nothing, well, there maybe is, but more exciting than coming home with a big bag of fresh produce and thinking, how am I going to take care of my family this week?
And knowing how to do it, because you got a chef.
Yeah.
And a teaching kitchen.
And bone broth.
Oh, bone broth. One more time for bone broth. Oh, my word. I don't know if I'm ever going to do that, but nonetheless, thank you for introducing us to it. This has really been a fantastic program and a great show. We're really grateful for your time and specifically for your ministry for all these years that you've given to this down at Tabernacle Presbyterian. Thank you so much for doing good in the community as a Christian.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50. Looking forward to next week. We have another special guest coming in. Always grateful for folks in and around Indianapolis who let us know about people we should have on our show. Always grateful to share the microphone with Christians who are doing good throughout Indianapolis. We're grateful for your time today. Go to check us out at comeniusinstitute.org.com, warpandwoof.org. That's warpandwoof.org. Or go to the iTunes store, look up Warp and Woof Radio and find us there. You'll find all of our episodes that we've been connecting to folks in and around Indianapolis, all of these kinds of good ministries that are happening. You can find out all kinds of special investigative ideas that will inspire you there, just as Sally John has done with us today. Thanks ever so much for being here. We'll see you again next week.